Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Out of Spec podcast. I'm joined by Jordan today, and I'm Max, and we're talking about the Polestar 4, which just had pricing announced for the US market. Jordan, you've actually spent some time hands-on with this car. I myself drive a Polestar 2, so we're both familiar with the brand.
This episode is made possible by the support we get from Fort Collins Kia. If you are in the market for any electric Kia, not only do they never add market adjustments, they will deliver your car to you anywhere in the 48 contiguous states for out-of-spec viewers. More information in the link in the show notes.
What is Polestar for those who have heard of the brand watching but are like, what is their lineup at right now?
Yeah, it's kind of I was going to start this with, from the makers of weirdly lifted sedans, we have another weirdly lifted sedan. But they are kind of offshoot of Volvo. I mean, people sometimes get them confused. People sometimes think they are Volvo. They are different, but there's a lot of underpinnings that are the same, and it kind of makes sense. The interior ethos, some of the design language, it feels very Volvo. It is kind of almost like a sporty version of Volvo, but they're completely different. They have all an equally weird naming convention, I would say. Not really weird, it's just numbers, but they also don't necessarily go hand in hand with, we had Polestar 1 and then we had 2, but now I think we're getting 4. Next will come 3, and 3 is bigger than 4 in some ways.
Yeah.
But 4 is more powerful. So I don't know.
Their naming convention is really just the current model they originally planned. The issue for Polestar has been, I think they wanted the Polestar 3 to be out months ago now, and we'll have a separate podcast episode about that because that's also imminent. But Polestar 4 is actually launching slightly earlier because it's a totally different vehicle. Like you were saying, Jordan, it's in some ways sportier, more sedan-like than Polestar 3, but also less premium and a bit cheaper. So platform-wise, what's interesting is like Polestar, like you said, Jordan, has Volvo DNA. That's what I think most people are familiar with the brand as, but increasingly that's less and less the case. The Polestar 1, which Kyle actually owns one and drives, is a really cool like Swedish muscle car hybrid kind of, balls to the wall concept they made that was really interesting. And it based off, kind of Volvo S90, different proportions, but like that design language had a lot of Volvo going on. It was a Volvo platform. The Polestar 2 was originally unveiled as a Volvo concept in 2016 and then ended up becoming, Polestar's first all-electric vehicle. I drive it. It's great. It's a competitor to the Model 3. It's more handsome. It's significantly less efficient. And then there's the Polestar 3, which is, like you said, supposed to be their SUV. That's based off the Volvo EX90, but then everything seems to divert from there because the Polestar 4 is actually based off a different platform within the Chinese mega corporation Geely that owns both Volvo and Polestar. And by the way, Jordan, do you know, is it Geely or Geely? I never know how to pronounce it.
I think it's Geely.
Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, Polestar 4 is interesting. Definitely. It made kind of headlines with the removal, controversially, of a back window, which Polestar was like, well, this gives, extra storage space and such. So they tried to justify it. I think it does look pretty sweet. Like the vibe is very sleek and sexy, and I don't know, I'm not a big sedan person, but I'm a big Polestar sedan person because they quote unquote redefine sedan. And by that I mean they actually don't even listen to the definition. Like they don't call their cars SUV or sedan. They just call them the name because they're like, well, this is what it is.
And the Polestar 2 was never really a sedan because that was based off a small SUV platform. And this is also a lifted sedan, seemingly.
So I think they're breaking molds just to break molds. They're breaking naming conventions just to break naming conventions and our brains. But Polestar 4 is definitely awesome. They have the same kind of design on the front of the Thor's hammer type headlights, but it's like a split hammer design. Polestar 3 is similar to this. I kind of saw Polestar 3 and Polestar 4 as similar, like, products, but like one's like more of the sedan sporty one, one's the more luxury SUV looking one. But it is interesting how many things are totally different. Like you said, different platforms, different actual software stacks. The Polestar 4 software definitely felt more futuristic. The Polestar 3 is still working with the portrait oriented screen. that we've seen in Polestar 1 and 2. Not the
Yep.
same screen, but like the same kind of design and the Google stuff, whereas Polestar
But they're
4 has felt like
both
a whole new.
But I think they're both Google based, is the weird thing. They both have Google Maps and they're both Android. They're just like wildly different versions of it.
Yeah, which is strange, I think, as usually the brand ethos, it's like the software is what keeps it all the same. Like if you buy a Tesla, it's like, okay, they're all going to have the same type of software. It's just what flavor of car do you want? Whereas this really does feel different, but kind of refreshing. I will say, so me and Tollett got to ride around in this. We didn't get to drive it. This is early pre-production kind of, well, I don't know how early, but this was last year at Polestar Day down here in LA. And it was super interesting because, yeah, you look behind you, no back window,
Yeah.
which felt a little bit claustrophobic, except the glass roof is so good. And if it didn't have a glass roof, I would say that would not work. But because of the glass roof, I still felt pretty open, very spacious. The whole reason they said they removed the rear window is to move that kind of pillar that where the trunk hinge would happen behind the rear passenger's head, whereas usually it might be kind of above the rear head. So it supposedly improves rear storage capacity on the trunk, the boot, whatever you call it, and also improve rear passenger headroom. The rear view mirror then is all digital. Honestly, how the Cybertruck should have been done. This pristine digital rear view mirror where you'd see a normal rear view mirror, one of the best I've ever seen in my life. So they say rear-facing HD camera. I feel like other auto manufacturers would be like rear-facing 4K camera or something, and then it would be terrible. This one is actually phenomenally clear and good.
Yeah, it's a statement piece in my opinion. I know they told you and Pollock it's for passenger space or whatever. I think they kind of did this as an attention-getting move and maybe to give the designers some more legroom because I'm sure this is probably the future of a lot of especially liftback, sport coupes, whatever other body styles get invented in the next few decades to come. This is going to, afford designers some more freedom, and I'm actually here for it because the reality is, people will say, oh, I want my rear window. I've heard people say that. I get it, but I think a lot of people who are making that complaint haven't driven modern cars because modern cars increasingly have worse and worse natural visibility to begin with for a variety of reasons. Some of it's design, some of it's safety regulations, but it's just increasingly we're dependent on this technology. So if we're going to be so dependent, we might as well have that technology be good. And so it's good to hear from you that the Polestar 4 does indeed at least have a proper rear view camera, a good rear view mirror with the screen. Feels like that's the way you'd want to do it. I know there's still some issues to sort out. Some people will talk about the focal distance issue, where your eyes aren't actually, focusing on the same plane. So you have to refocus them between looking at the road and looking at a screen. So there's some issues that may pop up here and there, but I think it's a really interesting, bold experiment in automotive design. Would I want to be one of the first to adopt it as a customer? I don't know.
So I guess talking about that adoption, what is the details on that? Like, what are they charging for this, and how does that compare to Polestar, I guess, 2 and 3?
Yeah, so 3 is more of I think that's going to be their most premium vehicle yet. And the weird thing is, from a chassis perspective, despite being an SUV, the Polestar 3 is actually more hardcore than this. It's basically a Volvo EX90, upon which they've done a bunch of things like add in a dual clutch to the back end so it functions as a limited slip differential, tons of reinforcing. Our friend Tom Malogny drove a Polestar 4 on the ice and was really impressed with Polestar 3 on the ice and was really impressive with how sporty that felt. That's like a really hardcore sporty SUV that originally was derived from a 3-row SUV but smaller. But today we're talking about Polestar 4. This is much more towards that luxury end, like you were saying, Jordan, with some sporty options. So yeah, numbers wise, we're looking at range, because that's the elephant in the room, 300 miles for the single motor version, and then 270 for the dual motor all-wheel drive. Not a lot of range. It's going to be 100 kilowatt hour standard battery in the US for all trims. The pricing starts at 55, 56 grand. I've seen different headlines here because apparently the pricing has just been announced, but according to Polestar on their site, it's cheaper than what they just announced. So I don't know. But mid 50 grand is what we're thinking it will start at, and then dual motor will bump that up by 7 or 8 grand. And if you care about performance, that's going to be a big deal, because it's honestly, with single motor rear wheel drive, 6.9 seconds to 60. Not slow, but not really quick. Then you go to dual motor and it's like 540 horsepower, 3.7 second to 60, which would actually make this Polestar's quickest vehicle yet. I drive the Polestar 2, which is actually considerably smaller and lighter, a bit less premium for the backseat passengers, and a bit slower to 60. So this is impressive. This is a heavier, larger vehicle, and it still has a pretty fast to 60 time. So in a straight line, at least, I think this is going to be pretty nice. But I'm not hearing a ton about this chassis being like super sporty. I think the idea is more towards them giving rear passengers lots of comfort, with things like, having no rear window and the cool glass roof, which, by the way, is also electrochromatic, I believe.
Yeah, that's right.
So it can effectively become opaque. We've seen this on like supercars and some other stuff, but this is maybe one of the first times we're seeing it in a mass production car I can think of.
Toyota had it in their Venza, and
Okay.
well, I guess
Porsche
Porsche
and the
has it in
Taycan.
Taycan.
Yeah.
And it's a great technology. I hope it becomes just normal. The longer it's out, maybe the cheaper it gets to actually make it.
Yeah.
I do have a point to pick. I mean, are they allowed to call this long range dual motor if the range is under 300 miles? Like, I feel like
For a
everyone
modern
is at
EV, yeah.
everyone is at this precipice where they're like, if it's under 300 miles, they have to be talked into it. Now, I like to play devil's advocate, because and you also just spent some time with the Fiat 500e, which is 150 mile range, and that's actually enough range for most all of my needs. Now, unless I'm road tripping, that's a different story. But around town, and by the way, we live in a very sprawling metropolis, it's still enough range for me to live with. So this whole like, oh, I don't want this unless it has 300 miles range, I'll pick that. I have a bone to pick with that. But
Yeah.
on the other hand, I think calling this long range dual motor with a range of 270, by the way, it's EPA, so it may not even hit that on the highway, which of course we're excited to test when we get it.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of annoying.
Yeah, I think it just speaks to basically Polestar doesn't seem to know how to make an efficient vehicle. They have made Polestar 2 a bit more efficient in the refresh, which I drove since the one I have. So like it's a little bit better, and this has similar technology where there's a clutch for the front motor, it can disengage it, but it's still no Tesla, it's no Lucid. It's, to me, is kind of like, I would say Polestar, if there's a brand they're trying to be and like definitely want to be one day, it's Porsche, right? And Porsche has this concept of fast travel or travel time, which, people will have heard of if they've watched yours or Kyle's coverage of that, right? Where Porsche considers it not just the range figure, but the recharging time. And that's why the Taycan, both in the last generation and the current generation, has such impressive charging. I think the thing that's disappointing to me isn't so much the range, because I never expected that to be good, especially considering you can get 22-inch wheels on the sedan. I think the disappointment is that it's 30-minute 10 to 80%, which is like fine, but by no means class leading. No, 800 volt high voltage architecture. A Porsche Taycan can do 10 to 80% in what now 16 minutes with the newest generation, and this is almost double that. Of course, that relies on having the right charger, but I think that's a bit of a disappointment, especially considering that, Geely, Chinese brand, you'd think they could source some really state-of-the-art batteries, but I guess they're not like BYD or CATL. They don't have those connections. And interestingly, I think they want to eventually build this in South Korea. So I'm not sure who's providing the battery, if it's SK Innovations or Samsung or whom, but it doesn't seem to be a class-leading battery, and I think that's kind of the culprit of why this isn't so impressive from both a range and charging perspective. But like you said, Jordan, playing devil's advocate, if most people are driving this as an urban setting in a modern EV, over 200 miles of range is fine. Like, I understand the hesitance that people will have coming from combustion towards that, but Jordan, my question is, who's buying the Polestar for? Is it someone who's never bought an EV before? Is it someone who is cross-shopping with a Tesla Model S or a Volkswagen ID.7? Like, who do you think this is for?
I think so. I guess one note on the charging. Do you know the charging like peak speed? Did they actually list
I
that?
forget off the top of my head. I believe it's like 170, 180 kilowatts, not in the high
Yeah.
voltage range.
So not class leading by any means. But yeah, the interesting thing is Polestar 3 and 4. I'm very excited for them. I think there's a lot of really interesting sort of innovation. I don't know if I'd call it innovation per se with like the drivetrain, but just the interior fit and finish is phenomenal. It feels ahead of its class. Like this is probably a competitor with Volkswagen ID.7, maybe a little bit Model S, although it kind of undercuts the price in some ways. But it does feel like a step above even the ID.7, which is claimed to be kind of their flagship, almost Arteon replacement.
Right.
This feels like definitely a leg up on some of the competition in terms of the fit and finish. And I think that's partially what is its saving grace. I mean, if you're not as obsessed about long range, which I think people overhype the long range needs, like we said, and as long as that's decent charging, which this does, this is not like trickle charging, terrible performance like we've seen in some of the other Toyota-ish the EVs. This is like totally fine for pretty much everyone. And maybe that's their goal because on the note of battery, we will see probably a leapfrog in performance on the Polestar 5. That's the one that should be their flagship sedan, quote unquote, Tesla killer. I guarantee we'll see those headlines. Maybe Lucid killer. Maybe we'll see a new headline.
And that's like a hardcore performance one, right?
Well, no, that's just like flagship luxury sedan with their
Grand Tour.
800 something volt like architecture, battery charging, which is like I forget like 100 miles in 5 minutes type of thing is what they
They're
say.
working with is it Northvolt, or they're working with a company on that, I believe, right?
Yeah, I forget the company's name. You know, one of those.
I think it's
names.
it's something plus plus. It's some weird name. But anyhow, they're working with a battery company. They've co-invested in on that. And then Polestar 6 is your dream car. It's a roadster. And then Polestar 7 is a reimagining of Polestar 2, which I thought the 4 was supposed to be. So I don't know what's going on, but
So will the reimaginings just be Polestar in plus 5 as far as numerically speaking? So I can't wait for the second gen Polestar 4, which will be Polestar 9. No, I'm just kidding. But Max, I do want to say like Polestar is probably, you know, for who's adopting this, I think Polestar is definitely approachable for the traditional ICE driver. Like if someone has a Volvo and they're like, you know what, I think I'm going to go electric. I mean, as a Polestar 2 owner, you could probably speak to the fact that it's not that different as far as a driving perspective. You still have a similar shifter. You know, a lot of the buttons and feel is the same. I mean, you have one pedal driving, but even that's optional. You can turn that off, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, you can turn it to low mode or off, and even have it creep, just like you can in Polestar 2. So I think in Tesla you can also turn and creep on, but you can never really turn one pedal off. But Polestar is totally approachable. Still has stalks in the steering wheel. In terms of the more radical things that some of the other brands like Tesla are doing with full self-driving, quote unquote, or supervised, I think it's called now. This has an improved driving assistance system. So it's pilot still. They still charge extra for it, but it has lane change assist. And I think it's more advanced. It's not like what we're seeing, weirdly enough, on Polestar 3 and Volvo EX90, which is LiDAR based, and that's maybe supposedly going to be amazing. This is less ambitious, but it's also better than what I have in my Polestar 2. And what I have in my Polestar 2 is basic lane centering and adaptive cruise. And it's like fine, but it's definitely not class leading. They haven't talked too much about this, which tells me maybe it's not going to be class leading either. But, it's weird because like Polestar, in my mind, I never really understand what they're going for. Initially, we thought at the gate they would be performance focused, right? Doing things like the Polestar 1. But then here we are praising the Polestar 4 most of all for its luxurious appointments. And then in some ways, they're also a very tech forward brand. They've always done the phone is key thing, letting you do one pedal driving, and then having, the nice interior screens. And yet, they, in other ways, aren't exactly leading the charge on technology. So I never really know what this brand is, but I guess maybe it's just, for those customers who are willing to be a bit more experimental than buying a basic Volvo, or maybe don't want to buy a Tesla. It's a good alternative. I don't know. Like, who is Polestar, Jordan?
Why is Polestar? Yeah, I don't know. And I think maybe they're still trying to figure that out. I mean, the marketing speak is like, oh, we've left behind, or they called it SUV coupe transformed. So they're trying to figure out how to redesign or recreate the SUV coupe. And they're coupe form with SUV functionality. They said those when they showed us the Polestar 4, and I was like, okay, these are like very marketing speak, and they're just trying to like explain away with some of the things they did. And I think some of it makes sense, but the design's interesting. I think Polestar has a place in the market for sure. In fact, if I had to go rent an EV for a week to do most normal things, I probably would lean Polestar because I think they're very interesting, and I'm all about what's the interesting vehicles. And Polestar 4, I can't wait to drive them back to back. I rode in them back to back, but that didn't really tell me a whole lot other than like, wow, they're both impressive. Now this is a spring suspension system, whereas Polestar 3 I think is on air.
Yep.
So that's definitely a bit of a difference.
But active dampers.
Yeah, and so in some ways the 3 did feel like, oh, this is the nicer higher end one, but then the Polestar 4 got a bigger center screen, also a bigger driver screen, by the way. The driver screen is 10.2 inches up from I think 9 inches in Polestar 3. But then a worse sound system, Harman Kardon, instead of the Bowers and Wilkins of Polestar 3. But it's a really good Harman Kardon. It's just like, I don't really know what's... Oh, and then they went crazy with ambient lighting. They have like solar system modes in the software of Polestar 4 where it's like, you can pick Saturn and it'll change the ambient lighting to reflect Saturn. Because we've been there, I guess. I don't know.
It's space themed somehow.
It's very
Which I guess
My
Polestar
friend,
always has had that going because it's one, the brand is Polestar, and then also they've done I think like the launch colors for my car, I have Moon was one of the colors, and they had Void and Jupiter and all this stuff. So maybe they're leaning a bit more into that. I hope they do more of that because I feel like things like that is what can help set them apart as a brand and help me consider this over a BMW i5 or an ID.7, because like we're talking about, it is nicer in some other ways, but I think like if you're not you or I, we both appreciate weird offbeat cars. It's a hard case to make for Polestar to someone who might be more risk averse and be like, I don't really know, like, what is Polestar? Where can I even get this thing serviced? Like, there's a bit more unknowns with its brand. So there's some benefits to that. If you like the Tesla, Lucid, Rivian experience of ordering online, no haggle price, you get that with Polestar, which is cool.
Yeah. And I think leaning into some of the themes like the kind of space ethos. I mean, my friend Bennett is obsessed with Polestar now, partially because I think he experienced yours maybe when he was visiting, but also he's like really into the space thing, so he'll probably just buy one of these eventually. And I actually was checking my notes, and I did see that it says LiDAR, but I don't know if they removed that, because when they showed it to us and Polestar Day, Polestar 4 had LiDAR and 12 cameras and radar and vehicle to load capability. But I don't know how much of that really finally made production.
Let's look in the configurator page, which hopefully should have the most up-to-date info and figure that out. I guess let's just spec our dream Polestar 4. What is the best Polestar 4 spec, Jordan? Where do we begin?
Yeah, I would just say long range dual motor, may as well go for it. And this is, we were talking about competitors earlier. This is like weirdly in between a lot of price points. Like it does undercut, I think, Model S and i5, but and maybe ID.7, although I'm not sure about pricing on that yet. But then it's more expensive than some of the, I guess, more entry level sedans. So I don't know that. But their color palette's amazing. I mean,
it's a little bit muted for my taste, but there's my favorite brown adjacent gold color.
Yeah, Max would order gold on beige with yellow seatbelts. Just all
everything just has to be a shade of tan.
And I'll get all the cool tones. What's the one above gold?
That's Electron. So like atomic and space themed. I don't know. Maybe they should do some Fallout co-branding or something. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
But
so for
it is
our
very
audio
cool.
listeners, I'll try to explain what's happening. But we are, building this gorgeous car. By the way,
what price are we at, Jordan? So far, we've selected a $1,300 Electron and dual motor. We're at what, $76,000?
$76,000 after. Wait, what made it 76? Dual motor.
Dual motor, and then there's some other things we have selected here. So we'll just talk about the price at the end.
Interior
Interior.
can really get expensive.
Yeah. Should we go with the Napa leather that's ventilated? That's a $5,000
Yeah,
option.
you got to have massage seats, man, and headrest speakers. Like, yeah, just go
Okay.
full.
Yeah.
And is it animal welfare Napa, or is that just the top option? That's kind of
Yeah, the other, it's like, which kind of eggs can you afford? How ethical can you be? If you get the budget one, then it's not animal welfare. It's non-sustainable leather.
Yeah.
But here we've got the nice leather upgrades. Now this
looks
is,
great.
oh yeah, it's primo. And then upgrades is where it gets weird because Polestar 2 has been, I think, plus Pilot Performance. There's a new in-between package here. So Pilot is just the basic, lane assist, adaptive cruise control, all of that, which is nice. Let's actually see, does it have LiDAR? They're advertising Pilot Assist. They're not talking about LiDAR, but it will give you the just Pilot Assist and Lane Change Assist. The nice thing is you get a standard 360-degree camera and adaptive cruise. Long overdue.
Yep. But that's wait. Oh, so what Pilot Pack is included? So you do
if you get the dual motor, it's included.
Oh, okay, right. So then
and then
you get the
Plus Pack
assistance.
is like the luxury one, heads-up display, nicer interior, the power tailgate, which I guess isn't standard. That's interesting. Auto-dimming mirrors, rear screen, which is a standard feature in the new Model 3, 12-way adjustable front seats, nice. Power reclining rear. Okay.
Those are nice.
No wonder this car's so heavy. Heated steering wheel and rear seats, 3-zone climate control, air filtration, cool. So that's Plus Pack $5,000 for that as well.
Just give me rear cooled seats. That's all I'm asking for. Anyway,
yeah, someone besides Hyundai Motor Group needs to figure out how to get this alien technology into cars. Pro Pack is the new one. So we're talking about Performance Pack. That's been a Polestar thing before. Pro Pack is kind of like a light performance pack with some cosmetics. To me, it seems very expensive. $2,000 gets you non-forged, but nicer, supposedly 21-inch Pro wheels, and not Swedish gold seatbelts, gold striped seatbelts. So there's a little gold stripe running through them.
That's how people know you're performance leaning, but not performance oriented.
Oh, you also get gold valve stems.
Is that all it comes with?
That's it.
Okay. Well, yeah, not really worth $2,000 in my opinion, but
they're taking a page from Apple with Pro there, I guess.
At least they are more. It's more expensive than the wheels that you could order for the Mac Pro. So that's saying something.
Yes, but if you really want to go, and because they're exclusive, you can't get Pro and Performance. If we're really talking about our dream Polestar 4, we want Performance Pack. So $4,500 tacked on there. But here's what that gives us, and you can only, by the way, get this in the dual motor because who in their right mind would try to spec this on the base one? 22-inch performance wheels, forged, Polestar engineered chassis tuning, Brembo brakes, Swedish gold accents, and then it's interesting, no Öhlins suspension, which is a Swedish company renowned in the racing and the rally world. I have it on my Polestar 2. This time they're actually using adaptive electronic dampers from ZF.
Interesting. Another partnership. And now we've breached $80,000.
Oh God. Yeah, this vehicle can get expensive. But what do you think of all these performance accoutrements where also get properly gold seatbelts?
I think it's pretty fantastic. And I would love to drive this, back to back with Taycan. Taycan is like one of those halo cars for performance, even if it's not class leading speed. Like if you get one of the entry level Taycans, although the new Taycan has improved even the base model, I would love to see how those compare to this. I do think those will outdo it. They're probably a bit lighter. They're a bit more performance oriented, but compromise in space and technology. I just don't love the Taycan tech and how you interact with it as a driver. Whereas Polestar, I think, is a step above for sure. So We have to add the electrochromatic glass roof still.
Yeah, $2,000 there. And then do we want color matched molding? That's another $1,000.
What are color match? Oh,
So you can see, because of it's an electric car and has a battery floor, this has quite the undercarriage going on. Lots of black plastic. So if we really want the best looking Polestar 4, we want to delete some of that with color matching.
interesting. Yeah. So now it's 83.5. Now we're probably done. Are we, please?
Do we want an electronic releasing tow bar hitch?
2,600.
This has a maximum towing capacity of $3,500, which is also actually, 3,500 pounds. Getting British and currency confused. It's Tuesday, isn't it? But it's actually, like 3,500 pounds isn't terrible. It's no, it's not truck specs, but like it's a very European option. I don't know what in America you could tow that would fit within that, but like that's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. So
I say we add it.
There's things you can add. I mean, we could, I guess, go up to about 80. Oh, yeah, 86.
We're getting not far from base
90,000.
Taycan territory.
Yeah, which this makes me, Polestar 3, when they was unveiled, and again, we'll do a whole podcast on that, but it undercut the price that was initially advertised or aiming for. But now I'm wondering how quickly we're going to get back to that price with just a couple options.
Yeah, so but to be fair, that's like all the options, whereas in Porsche land, you get the base car, you're not getting a lot.
But we did just add $25,000 of options to a Polestar 4. I do want to point out.
Yeah. So
which is wild. So I don't know. What's your? I mean, we should probably wrap this up. But what's your final thoughts on this beautiful thing?
I don't know. I'm intrigued as a Polestar 2 owner. Part of me is kind of jealous because it's like, oh, this is the new hot kid in town. And then part of me is also like, oh, it's chubbier, it's less sporty, it's more luxurious, it's a bit different. And because I guess Polestar 7 will be the new version of my car. So when that comes out, that's when I'll actually get FOMO. But with this, I'm just... I'm glad to see the Polestar brand expanding. I've heard comments from their executives that they expect this to be their biggest volume seller. So it's a very important car for them. I think it's already been out in China for a little bit now. So I don't know. We'll have to see what the US reaction is. I don't know what American buyers, to be honest, are going to think of its body style. I'm just glad that it is still a liftback or a hatch and not a sedan like an i5. I think that gives it a lot of, class, character, practicality. So it's nice to see that still.
Yeah, it's I think it's like 17 cubic feet behind the seats, and then with the seats down, it's like 50 cubic feet. So
yeah, Model S territory.
Pretty solid. So I don't know. I'm intrigued. Like you said, I'm curious what all of you in the audience think of the whole removing the back window thing. Are you fine leaning on digital rearview mirrors? Notably, Tesla's done that with the Cybertruck. Mostly, you can still drive with the vault open and then use the normal mirror, which is still not great. So I'm definitely okay with it, but even the focal stuff you were talking about, it's like that's a concern. But yeah, it's interesting. It's controversial in some ways, beautiful in other ways. The lower hood line is a nice design touch. There's a lot of cool design features with Polestar, and that's why I like watching them as a brand. I think a design-oriented person. I would buy a car based on how it looks and sacrifice some of the functionality. Whereas many other people are like, what is the charging speed and the range? And that's why I'll buy it.
Which is funny because Polestar executives have made that exact comment where they're like, we actively make our cars. Well, they didn't say they make them worse, but they're like, yeah, we don't chase range as a be-all, end-all. They actually go for design first. And that's the ethos of the brand. So if that suits you, it's nice that there's someone in the market that does that.
And maybe that'll work. I mean, we're in this like early adopter EV era still. And so people are hyper-focused on range, but maybe more and more people will realize you don't need the range you think you need, in which case they'll come around and Polestar was like, I've been here this whole time. Welcome aboard. So, yeah, Polestar 4 looks good.
Yeah, let us know what you think. Thanks for joining me, Jordan, and see everyone in the next one. Bye.
Cheers.